What's up, everyone, and welcome in to your Celtic Source. Happy Monday, August 25th. Man, this summer has just flown by. It feels like just last week we were talking about the Pacers and Thunder series. Um, but I've been super busy this summer. Hadn't had the chance to record any videos about all this news coming out. The schedule release, the sort of official change in ownership, some littler things that we're going to get into as well. We're going to do all of that. We're going to talk about Jaylen Brown and how he has to step up this season, and a big year for Joe Mazzulla as well, right? He's always had a brilliant team around him, and this might be the first time where he really has to change it up and dig deep, um, or his job might be on the line. Even though they did sign him to a 2 year or something extension. I don't know the exact details on that, but we'll talk about that. We're not going to do a full season preview today. We'll do that actually tomorrow night, where we do our way too early season preview. I believe it's at 7 p.m. So make sure to tune in for that as well. Um, but we're going to talk about today the center position as well. That might be you know, maybe the biggest question mark on this team right now is who is going to play center. Because you have, Amari Williams, you have Queta, who's been here for a couple of years. You have who they pick up the other day. You have Boucher, right? All these guys that could play center, but nobody is a true starting center. They're all pretty deep backups. So, you know, it doesn't really matter, right? Jaylen Brown might play really well. Derrick White, Payton Pritchard, that trio might play extremely well, but you have to have a functioning center to even stand a chance in this league, right? And I don't know if the Celtics have that, but we'll talk about that. But we'll start with, I guess, schedule release, right? Um, there's this big question, right? When you see teams on your schedule, when you see your schedule, you're looking for, everyone plays everyone, so it's not really a strength of schedule type of thing. It's more of like, when do you play them, right? Because if you play two teams that are really good back to back, right, those might be both losses. Whereas if you have a day in between or some rest, um, or they come at it when you're at home versus away at a certain time, those might be wins. And at this team, right, if they want to get into the playoffs, um, the Eastern Conference is weak, but you got to fight and scrap for every win. So, you're looking at the schedule, and it's pretty mixed, right? There's a big, hunter versus hunted debate, right? If you're one of the better teams, you're the hunter. You're going after other teams, right? If you're sort of the reigning champ, you are the hunted. You are, teams are coming after you. Um, but the Celtics are sort of in between. Yes, they're coming off that championship a year or two ago, but obviously they traded off their whole team, and it's not a full rebuild. It's more of a sort of gap year. We're hoping, right? We don't really know with this new ownership or whatever. We're hoping it's a gap year, and they can get right back to it in the next coming years. Um, but I think it just depends on the opponent whether they are, teams are looking at them and trying to, get up to their standards, or whether the Celtics are sort of looking at it from the bottom and trying to fight their way up to the top, right? You know, I think we'll start with some of the key games, the returns of Luke Kornet, Holiday, Porzingis, maybe Al Horford. We'll see what happens with him. Uh, but I think it's what I'm trying to say is like there the games this year, right? We don't play on Christmas this year. There are some big games, of course, right? You're always going to get up for a Lakers Celtics games. Even I think when Dallas comes to town with Cooper Flag, of course, being from the New England area, obviously not quite New England, but like the New England area, that's going to be big. He grew up a Celtics fan, of course. Um, so those will be big games. Those will be sellout crowds. But in a year where you're just I think you're just happy to make the play in the Eastern Conference, let alone the playoffs. Um, I don't think there should be too much stress on this season, right? I'll just go through some of the big games here quickly. January 10th is Luke Kornet's return. I think he's going to get a huge ovation. I mean, yes, he wasn't you know, the main center, but some of the performances he had in the playoffs last year and the energy and the vibes he brings, fans love him, of course. So he's going to be it's going to be a big night for him on January 10th. January 26th, Holiday comes back with the Blazers. It's funny how Holiday got traded from the Blazers, obviously from the Bucks, but via the Blazers, and then he goes back to the Blazers afterward. Sort of a unfortunate sort of slight against him, right? That he had to go back to a team that is on the up and coming, but they're not even. I think they're not even. I don't think they're quite there yet, right? They're going to be worse than the Celtics this year, I think. Um, the Celtics actually got back a really good player in Anthony Simmons, who, obviously struggles on the defense, but I think could be a great offensive player for the Celtics. And I don't know what they're going to do. They might get rid of him, before the start of the season. But then you also have the fact that he could just thrive in an offensive role and be a sort of the instant offense that you sort of are missing with Jayson Tatum, right? Obviously, he's not going to be the main guy. That would be Jaylen Brown. But, could you get some shooting in the corner if he could work on his shooting? Could you get some, off the dribble maybe when Derrick White is resting? And, Porzingis, he will, or sorry, can you get a sort of um, a little pick and roll with him maybe? Sorry, last one of my three sort of return games of players. I have Porzingis right on the 28th, so just 2 days after Holiday, he comes back with the Hawks. I think he'll get the biggest ovation of them all because I mean, everybody loved Porzingis, right? He would hyping up the crowd before everything. That game one in the NBA Finals where he comes out of the locker room um, and just pumping his fist like garden erupting like that. Such a huge moment for him. And it was unfortunate that he was like so sick this year in the playoffs. I think that was the reason that they didn't get out of the second round, to be honest. um some other games, December 5th, Lakers on Amazon Prime, right? All these new streaming services are coming this year, so that'll be fun to see how these services work out. Like, not a lot of people have Amazon Prime. It's kind of weird, even though it's a national game, right? You still have to have Amazon or whatever, and tickets are going to be pretty high at first. They're going to drop later in the season, of course, especially if they're not doing well. Um, you know, even it's funny. The Celtics, right? They still have a lot of national TV games, which makes sense, I guess. They are a big market, but they're not projected to do very well this year. They share a lot on Amazon Prime. They don't obviously play on Christmas, but they have some other ESPN games and whatever. Um, they open up against the 76ers on NBC, I think it is, with, I believe, they play the 76ers. Obviously, we talked about Kornet, Holiday, Porzingis, their returns. If Al Horford comes back with the Warriors, that'll be a big game. Um, you know, Tribute videos for I think everyone. Obviously, maybe the biggest one will be Al Horford if he comes back. We'll see what happens with him. They have 25 national TV games, including the ones that are on Prime, which are not technically national TV. Well, I guess, they are technically national TV, but they're not, free for everyone. You still have to have Prime to get it. Um, but let's see. They have a league low 13 back to back, so they're not playing lots of back to backs, which I think is great. Um, you know, ESPN says they have the easiest schedule in the league because they play a lot of these East opponents who are not great, and they don't have to travel that much in between. Um, I guess that's good for if the Celtics are trying to make the playoffs here. Um, but as we get into the roster here, I think the biggest thing is the Celtics could do very well if Jaylen Brown, Derrick White, Payton Pritchard are all playing 40 plus minutes a game. But you can't do that. You have to play them down in the 30s like normal. And that's where the Celtics are going to struggle because they don't have the depth behind them to fill in those spots. Right, when they're out, right? Like Jaylen Brown, Derrick White, that's a strong top two. But, if your third star is Payton Pritchard, that's it's pretty weak. Not that he's a bad player, but if he's starting now and not off your bench, right, that eliminates pretty much your entire bench, right? And the floor of this team is definitely a lottery team, right? I don't think they'll be there. I think their ceiling is probably in the, a 6 seed playoff spot. I think they'll probably be, I actually have them higher than most do. I probably have them at the 7th or 6th seed, somewhere there. They might be in the playoff. Um, but looking at the bench here, right? You have Hauser, Simmons, if he stays, obviously. You have Garza, who's barely played any minutes in the NBA, coming from the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? You have Walsh, who it'll be his third year, right? You have to get something out of him at this point. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind just scrapping him if you can't get anything from him this year. But you have Queta. You have Boucher. You have, Minot. Obviously, you have some other, 2-week players and the guys you drafted this year. Right? You have who are the guys that they drafted? Right? You have trying to think off the top of my head. Why am I blanking on their name? You have anyway, whatever. I don't think those guys are even going to play this year anyway. They'll probably be in the G League. But opponents can really just load up on Jaylen Brown and Derrick White because there's nobody really to bail them out, right? If they double team Jaylen Brown, double team Derrick White, double team Payton Pritchard when he's on the court, right? They're gonna kick it out, and nobody's gonna be able to. Right? There are not reliable shooters, playmakers to help them out, which is where I think the Celtics are gonna struggle on offense. Right? Payton Pritchard has to play really like Jalen Brunson to really give this team a chance. You know, mm, I think the Celtics have to play, almost a perfect game every night, um, to have a fighting chance. Because we talk about just we've said their lack of depth, specifically at the center position, which we can talk about now, right? Like we saw the struggles with Queta the last couple of years, right? Like what, right? He's okay on offense, right? He can be an okay rim threat. Obviously, he's not a shooter whatsoever, right? He struggles on defense. He can sort of be exposed out on the perimeter, right? And I also don't trust Jaylen Brown to be able to run an offense as the number one option. It's not that I don't trust Jaylen Brown's skills. It's just, that's not his style. He's not a playmaker guy. He is the sort of play finisher, right? Jayson Tatum, Derrick White makes the plays. They find Jaylen Brown for a powerful dunk or a open three or whatever it may be, right? Jaylen Brown's going to put his head down, I feel like, a lot. And not that he's going to lose the ball because he's gotten much better dribbling, but he might not find the best option, and it might come up as a a tough shot. Whereas, if you could kick it out, spin it around, move the defense, I really want Derrick White to be running the offense. I think, and Derrick White has to step up huge on offense as well, right? He's got to be scoring in the high 20s a night as well, which I think he can, right? Especially with Tatum out, right? He's going to have that opportunity. But I really think that Derrick White has to be making the plays, and Jaylen Brown can just be the one that sort of executes the plays. I don't want him, because I think Jaylen Brown has a little bit of tunnel vision, where he, sometimes he struggles, to sort of make plays for others, right? And then can we see Payton Pritchard handle 30 plus minutes a night? Like I don't know if he can hold up defensively to even do that. Um, Listen, if all three of these players succeed, right, it's a different story, right? This team could surprise a lot of people, but the more I would say probable option is that the roster looks overextended, almost vulnerable behind sort of the big three for the Celtics. Right, the depth, the rotation, right? If Brown or White sit, this team is really completely cooked, because you can't, you know, you can't play out there with just one or two starters, right? And Peyton Pritchard is not quite at starter level, I don't think. He is, starter caliber, like talent starter, but he's not ready for that kind of moment. We'll see. Maybe he is. Um, you know, very, very different than the last couple of years, right? The Celtics have always had, two or three all stars on the floor, right? Tatum, Brown, Holiday, Horford, White, right? And now you're going to get games where you have one. Maybe, I mean, there's what I think is probably going to be happen is Joe Mazzulla is going to be never want to play them all at the same time, because he's always going to want sort of stagger it so one is not on the court at all times, and then you're never going to get the power of all three of them on the court at the same time, right? They're going to all start, obviously, and then 6 minutes in, two of them are going to come off, and then they'll rotate it, but it's going to make it really hard to get all the power of all three of them playing together, right? And um, I think this is a big year for Joe Mazzulla, because Joe Mazzulla needs to find a way to play a little differently. I don't think he doesn't have the talent to just chuck up threes, right? That's not the kind of roster it is right now. And I think Joe Mazzulla is capable of changing his coaching style, but we haven't seen it yet, right? Like, can they do a lot more pick and rolls? Can they get into the paint, backdoor cuts, some lobs to Queta maybe? Like, we need a lot more of that, because they don't have the shooting talent to just bail, a Brown or a White out with a corner three. Um, and that's where Anthony Simmons can come into place, right? There's still some uncertainty whether he's going to even be part of this team come end of October, right? They might see him in training camp and cut him, or they might trade him. We'll see. I think they might try. I think they'll try and trade him, because if they can get even lower on the salary, that'll help them out in the next couple of years, right? Under the tax completely. Um, you know, you got all these fringe players, and Luka Garza, right? Can Baylor Shireman have a big sophomore year, right? These are all sort of wild cards, right? I think at least one or two of them, of these sort of end of the bench guys, has to sort of emerge almost unexpectedly, right? Um, you know, this big, if this, it's really gonna depend on, I think, how they start, right? If things go south early and they're gonna be below 500 by February, right? They're gonna sell things off at the trade time, I guess, which is gonna make it even worse for them to contend the next couple of years, right? And other East teams have flaws as well, right? Philly, Miami, Orlando, right? They all have injuries. They all have offensive concerns or defensive concerns, right? And this creates an opportunity to stay competitive, which is what I think you want, because I think you would rather have this team, be in the play-in, because I don't. The lottery odds, obviously, if they get a lottery spot, um, you know, and they actually get a top pick that could, you know, change their outcome or the outlook for in the next couple of years drastically. But the odds are so sort of flat right now that I think you have a better chance of just trying to stay competitive, be in the play, and have guys that maybe you can trade off if they prove themselves to be valuable assets this year, right? Maybe next season you can trade for other talent around the league, right? I'm probably gonna have them, this team at about 43, 44 wins, so just over 500, which in the East is definitely in the play-in, right? We saw some teams with losing records make the play-in last year. Um, no, it's probably, skepticism says, they're probably going to finish under that. With the very thin depth that they have, and basically the fragility. I'm worried about Jaylen Brown injury, a Derrick White injury. Right, Jaylen Brown's actually coming off an injury with his knee. Right, he got surgery over the summer. Obviously, he's going to be ready. They say at least for the start of the next season. But who knows, right? Like, could he re-injure that? I'm worried about that. You're always worried about another Achilles, especially after Tatum. All we'll see. Um, you know, I if the Celtics win 50 games, you know, I'll apologize because I just don't have them that well because you know I think obviously we're gonna follow this team the whole season through the ups and downs, which there will definitely be some. Right, this is not going to be a 60-win team. I'm telling you that right now. Um, but um, Brown has to be an alpha. White has to be a true number two in the league, right? Pritchard has to be reliable, right? He cannot, get exposed defensively, right? And you also have to have, of course, a couple of these bench guys stepping up. Um, you know, um, I just think what I really think. I think what's going to happen at first is, you know, Joe Mazzulla is going to try and win by playing Derrick White, Jaylen Brown 40 minutes a game. He's going to realize that that's not going to work. He's going to tone it down a little bit, and so they're going to start off strong. But I think they will lose a couple games in the dog days of January, February. They'll end up in the play-in. It'll be fine. Tatum, he's going to be back by February, but I don't think he should play this season. I would rest him the whole season, especially if you're only in the play-in. Like, although, if they're in the play-in and they think, oh, maybe we can come out and win if and go far in the playoffs if Tatum comes back. But I just disagree. Like, don't bring him back. Don't risk it. Right? You know, the Jaylen Brown debate, right? He looked really good in Game 5 after Tatum went down. Um, Arguably his best game ever, right? Obviously, that was also the Luke Kornet 10 blocks game. Um, but then you also have Game 6 where he just falls apart. And you had Game 7 in 2023 against Miami where he falls apart, although I think he's a much different player now than he was then, right? But he's gotta be the leader in this team, right? We'll sort of wrap it up here. Uh, you know, it's really all going to be about leadership, accountability, right? If they go down, if they start slow, right, and there's sort of drama in the clubhouse, right, that's going to hurt this season even more, right? And if they can start well and the vibes are high, maybe that changes everything. Uh, But Joe Mazzulla, I mentioned that huge year for him, right? Can he adapt in this, his new contract here? Um, we've seen him struggle, the last couple of years when things have not gone, I wouldn't say perfect, but have not gone well, right? Like, right, he was slow to go to Luke Kornet last season and played Porzingis way too much, and that hurt them down the stretch in the playoffs. Um, but Yeah, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Obviously, we will be back tomorrow night for a live stream, a way too early Celtics preview. We'll probably go over a little bit more about the stuff we were talking about today, more in depth. We'll talk a lot about Simmons as well. The roster, over unders for the season, some stats. Talk about all of that. But before I get out of here, I will just say, big news coming this week. We are going to be starting, a little store here selling some merch. So stay tuned for that. Really excited for it. Some shirts, some mugs, some stickers, and obviously, as the season goes on, we will get more. So stay tuned for that. It'd be I would thank you so much for just supporting me. But until next time, follow on social media at Your Celtic Source, Instagram, TikTok, and until next time, go Celtics.
It's over. Time to say it again, Boston. Anything's possible. Banner number 18 has been secured.